All right, so in the course, there's the folder that says biological oceanography because, we're getting toward the end of the course here and we want to talk about some things about sea life. So in that folder, you'll find a folder that says materials for this week, 510 to 514. There's some other folders that you can't see, but the 510 to 514 folder, let's see. In the plan for the week, I've changed everything around. So if you read the plan for the week earlier in the week, it's completely different now. I want to tell you a little bit about a toxin that coral makes called Palytoxin. And then there's an article I want you to read, and there's a short Palytoxin activity, and there's some videos to go along with it. You'll also have some more time tomorrow to complete the Palytoxin activity. And then on Thursday, when we're back, we'll go over some topics about life cycles of fish, including clownfish, because we breed clownfish here at school, and it's one of our things that we do. And then Friday, a little bit about coral reef ecology. Okay, so there are all kinds of different sorts of coral, and I'm going to tell you some stuff about coral and coral reefs. But one type of coral that is very colorful and is somewhat prized in our hobby are these coral called zoanthid coral. And zoanthid coral are these little button kind of looking coral. They're about the size of, people call them button polyps sometimes because they're about the size of a button, like a button on a shirt. And they can be very colorful, oftentimes with different colored fringed margins, different colors in the middle. Here's someone has cultured these different coral together in different sorts of shapes. And they're really pretty, but sometimes in nature, uh, bright colors are an indicator to animals to be careful or to have caution. It turns out we mostly just collect different sorts of different colored corals just so you can get all kinds of different variety of them. And some people make it their hobby to have a whole bunch of different types. There is another type of soft coral called Palythoa coral, and Palythoas are usually larger in size than most common zoanthids. And it actually turns out zoanthids are in the Palythoa family, but the Palythoa or larger button polyps, usually larger in size, oftentimes not quite as colorful. A lot of times they're like brown or green like this. And it turns out that this type of coral has a particularly high concentration of a toxin called Palytoxin. And in fact, the Palythoa coral, the pally, uh, lets you know there's a relationship between the coral and the toxin. So there's Palythoa toxin or Palytoxin that's present in coral. So there's an article that you can get to in the plan for the week, but it's also directly in the folder for this week. And it's from the same educational series from MASNA, the Marine Aquarium Society of North America, about Palytoxin. And the article is a brief article giving an overview about what Palytoxin is, what its usefulness is to coral, what kind of applications it can have for humans, and then implications for keeping it in the aquarium in terms of safety. So at the beginning, there's a thing about the discovery of Palytoxin. Coral has been known to man, as long as men and women have been going in the ocean. And sometimes you discover things intentionally, sometimes you discover things accidentally, but it turns out that this toxin that's in zoanthid and Palythoa coral, especially in high concentration, can be particularly sinister and even deadly to humans. Not all coral have high concentrations of Palytoxin, but some of it does in particular. Here's the chemical structure of the toxin itself, a little description about Palytoxin in general, and then some symptoms of Palytoxin poisoning. And so you can, if you dive on a reef or go scuba diving or snorkeling on a reef, one common thing a dive company will tell you is not to come in contact with the coral, and that's for a bunch of reasons. One reason is there's no reason for humans to interact with the coral. You could damage the coral tissue. If it's a stony coral, you could physically break the structure of the coral colony. That can take a long time to repair and grow back. But there's also a risk to you as a human, both getting cut by a sharp stony coral colony and also Palytoxin Palytoxin uh, poisoning through contact. There's some case studies here about some individual incidents that have happened with Palytoxin poisoning, and then safe handling practices. So in general, in aquariums, we don't come into contact with coral, and some coral especially you have to be very, very careful with. So in the plan for the week, I've put links to 4 separate videos, and 3 of them are news stories, so they're relatively short and quick. One says Palytoxin story from Quebec. So I'm not going to play them through the Zoom because the audio and video doesn't turn out very good. But this first story that I've linked to, this shows well, it's a still of part of the video. Hold on. Showing the particular coral in the aquarium that someone believes that they got sick from. Another story here, this one's from Australia, where an entire family was sickened, and then another story from in the United States. And those are quick news stories, about 2 minutes in length. They're each about 2 minutes. And then the fourth video is a link to a talk given by Julian Sprung. Julian Sprung has been in the aquarium hobby and done coral research for quite a long time. He owns a company called Two Little Fishies, and in fact, I'll see him next month at a trade show, and we keep coral that I got from him, and he buys coral from me. So some of the coral that he has in his aquarium actually came from the high school here, and so that the Julian Sprung talk is a longer talk, and that's the final one here about Palythoa. Okay, so what I want you to do is this Power of Palytoxin article, which is not only linked in the plan for the week, but also in the folder for this week. It just straight up says the power of palytoxins. And the palytoxin is just a few pages long. It's got some diagrams with it, so it's not a whole lot to read. And then the palytoxin assignment, it's in the folder for this week, but it's also on the right-hand side in the upcoming list. And I just want you to write a brief summary about the things that you read in the article. And it's always smart to preview the assignment so you know what kind of things you're looking for. But basically, what is palytoxin? Why do coral make palytoxin? What purpose does it serve? Besides coral, what other plants and animals have palytoxin? Because it's not just common among coral, but other animals produce toxins. And palytoxin poisoning is symptoms for people who are exposed to it. What are the common symptoms? What are the ways in which people might get palytoxin poisoning while working in an aquarium? And what safety precautions should you take around working around coral to prevent palytoxin poisoning? And what should you do if you feel like you've been poisoned by palytoxin? So what we're going to do is do a little project where you're actually going to cut up some pieces of coral and mount them onto plugs in order for us to make them available for sale. And you're going to super glue them onto rocks. It's a kind of a cool project, and not many people do it or know how to do it. And one of the precautions you take is being careful not to come into contact with palytoxin. It's generally not something to be afraid of. Most people never have a problem with it. I have had problem with palytoxin twice. One time I was, I guess you could say, unaware of palytoxin and was not careful and got pretty sick for a couple days. It wasn't such a big deal. Second time I was very aware of it, but was kind of in a rush and got some palytoxin poisoning. That time was even worse, but it wasn't super terrible. There's just ways to avoid it, just like the ways to avoid, any other kind of risks in your life. If you don't want to get bit by a shark, don't get in the ocean. If you don't want to get run over by a bull, don't go to Pamplona and do the running of the bulls. But even still, there's ways to protect yourself from contact with things. So anyway, that's all I have for you for today. You've got the rest of the period to work on the read the Power of Palytoxin. That's a tongue twister. Power of Palytoxin article, and work on the palytoxin assignment. Make sure you check in tomorrow too. And I'll share a couple other things about palytoxin, but then there's time in class tomorrow to work on that as well. Then Thursday and Friday, we'll talk about clownfish life cycle and life coral, and then we'll get into actually like doing some work with physical coral, so you can see both soft coral and hard coral and ways in which it naturally gets propagated or spread in the way we propagate it in our aquariums for display and for research. And then we're going to do a thing called the Fish Information Project too. So that's what I got for you for today. You got the rest of the period to work on that. If someone who was absent from class, you can share that information with them. But the video from this class will be recorded. I'll put it on YouTube and put a link for it too. If you have any questions, you can turn on your mic and ask them, or you can put it in the chat. I'll watch the chat. But I don't plan to stay in the Zoom very long because I've got to work on changing some stuff around for another class from the next class. So that's it for today. Peace. Check in tomorrow.